Carol here, and today I would like to share what I was born to do. And first of all, I was born as an artist and visionary. That was my core, I guess, neurology. And if you're interested in Myers-Briggs, you could say that I was born in INFP. So introvert, intuitive, and then F for feeling, because I have very deep empathy for other living beings, to the point of being an empath and feeling physical pain when I see others be hurt, especially if they're close to me. Very common, I guess. And then the last letter, P, means perceive versus judge. I really thought about the last letter, perceive versus judge, for a long, long time, and didn't know which one I was. And it turns out I flip around between FP, meaning very much feeling and perceiving, which I consider that to be a very feminine aspect, very passive and receptive. In other words, a meditator that lets go of ego and lets go of any need to control can then be more primed to perceive. That is, be a listener, be aware of what's going on and perceive that with your senses or your inner knowing. That's very much a passive receptive function. That's the P. And the J, on the other hand, is more masculine. At least, I haven't talked to Jung about this, wish he was around, but it seems to me that the J, especially when you look at Tesla, who's a J, versus others who may be Ps, the J's are more masculine. They take their knowledge and they do something with it. They take the knowledge that they've picked up from their surroundings and they judge it. And they say, that's good, that's bad. They put their own ego into it. Not that ego's bad. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying that it's your will is involved. And that's the J. And I'm very much a J. But I was born a P. I was born, well, of course, first of all, I was born female, and I am female, and I've carried that through my life. I'm very female. And with that comes a big dose of receptivity and passiveness, like lack of testosterone, sort of receptivity. And then I went into 10 years of intense college and graduate school work, studying chemical engineering and biomedical engineering, and learned, and I wanted to learn, and I wanted to be more J, more judgment, more taking those flights of fancy or thoughts of fancy and turning them into something real that could help the world. And in fact, when I was in high school, my inward mantra was that I wanted to do something to help the world. I wanted to do something, key word. And so I went to school for 10 years and did nothing but study. And I kind of liked that, actually. I found out I was very much of an introvert because I really enjoyed studying and I enjoyed learning, and that was what drove me. The more I could understand and learn, the more I could help the world, and that drove me. And I know that a lot of you feel that way too. So I'm not embarrassed to say that, very innermost truth. So as a result, I learned how to be a J. I learned all about the scientific method, and I learned mathematics when I took calculus 1, 2, 3, differential equations, advanced engineering mathematics, and then on up through applied engineering mathematics, and we learned about Fourier transform and Laplace transform and just yada yada. And then there was, depending on what teacher you had, he would teach his methods. So I learned, and I really was drawn the most to fluid mechanics, because I've always been mesmerized by water, and I always watched water and became it as I watched it. My consciousness pretty much became the water, and I loved watching waves crash and the air-water interface, what happened to that, and how whirlpools formed, or not how, but just watching them form and knowing that they form, and watching the flow patterns are always curved, always flowing inward, always reacting with each other. No flow existed without its neighbors. It was all one system, and that pretty much is my theory of the entire universe, how it works. You can just use water as a way to study the flow patterns of the universe. And so there's kind of, in chemical engineering, you think of the chemical and the physical sciences. The chemical sciences would be chemistry, and the physical sciences would be physics, and maybe, mechanical engineering. And I was less so involved in chemistry as I was in physics. Now, I mean, I made A's in my chemistry classes. I was the highest grade in my organic chemistry class, for example. Although I did make a D in biochemistry because I just don't like to memorize things, and you really pretty much have to do that. I like to know the theory, understand the theory, then I can remember things because I can figure it out all over again. For example, if I remember the theory, then I can just rederive everything, and that's how I learned, and that's how I like to be. In fact, my advisor, Dr. Robert L. Pigford, used to say, you should always derive the equation before you use it. Well, even if you weren't the original person that derived it, but that's how you understand it. My past was born the artist, the feeler, perceiver, and then learning how to be a TJ, which is a thinker, judger. So my feeling nature, feeling empathy and all, was transferred to non-feeling and thinking, because you have to do that in order to solve equations, to study biochemistry, to study, to memorize things, to study chemistry, and I have to say though that everything I studied, I did use my feeling and imagination skills to imagine what happened in 3D space when fluids flow, and what happens at interfaces, and what happens at boundary layers. And that really helped me develop a depth of what I studied. I believe that what I bring to the table are two rare Myers-Briggs personalities combined into one, the INFP and the INTJ, that fit into a pattern that makes so as an INFP and an INTJ, I got my PhD in chemical and biomedical engineering, and then I worked in industry for like 20 years and did research and a lot of theoretical work, a lot of practical work, a lot of product development and patents and things. And then about 10 years ago, my kids were getting older, they were teens, and I was getting tired of doing the rat race thing, and I really wanted to kind of go back to my roots and make a difference in the world. I wanted to do something bigger, like solve unification, because that was my own personal, I knew that you could unify physics. I mean, of course you have to, because it is unified. I mean, the whole universe is unified, and I just wanted to do it to where other people could understand it and I could understand it. So I thought about it for a long time, and I've talked about how I thought about it in my books, okay? So I'm not going to go into the minute details of that, but the approach that I ended up sticking with is that of a chemical engineering viewpoint based on the theories and the thought processes of fluid dynamics. So the Navier-Stokes equations, for example, model fluids flowing in our reality, and there's also in light theory Maxwell's equations and Faraday's work that led to Maxwell's equations, and they matched perfectly, and that models a different fluid. It's actually it's all the same fluid. Okay, we're all the same fluid, but it matches the fluid that forms a light photon. Okay, so Maxwell's equation models a light photon. Now, it doesn't model it in 3D space in any obvious way. It's just that the sine waves, that move at the speed of light, tell you about the light photon. And that wasn't really enough for me, but I knew that there was more going on than just what the equations show. And what I wanted was not equations telling me what the electric and magnetic fields were at any point in time, space-time, but I wanted a way to visualize a flowing fluid that would give rise to those Maxwell's equations. And that's the fundamental truth, and that's what we human beings can then visualize. That's what I wanted to visualize, was a flowing fluid. And I also got inspired by some of the ancient texts that talk about the void and how that occurred before the Big Bang and all that. So I thought that was a good starting point. What is the void? And so I define the void as whatever.
Walk down that lonesome road all by yourself. Don't turn your head back over your shoulder, and only stop to rest yourself when the silver